Hello, I'd like to welcome you all to the National Good Food Network webinar, School Food Focus. Let me just give you a very brief introduction to the webinar software so that you can get the most out of your time with us today. Your webinar screen looks something like this. There's the slide presentations over here on the left and the control panel on the right. Over in the control panel, there's a questions box. You are muted during the presentation, so please use this questions box to type in your questions for our presenters. The webinar will be archived on the ngfn.org website. Go to ngfn.org/webinars. You'll also find all of the previous NGFN webinars archived there. If you've missed any, that's the place to go. And finally, I really would like to encourage you to complete our post-webinar survey. It'll take just a minute, and it really helps us to continue to improve our webinars and our outreach. So now let me hand the mic over to Marty Grenzer, who is the Program Manager for the National Good Food Network, and she's going to describe what the network is and what we do. So Marty?
Hello everyone, and welcome to the webinar today. I'm Marty Grenzer, the manager for the National Good Food Network at the Wallace Center. And before we get started with the presentations, I'd like to tell you just a little bit more about the National Good Food Network. The National Good Food Network emerged through many conversations and collaborations with regional and national food systems leaders from around the country. Some are on the webinar today, along with the Wallace Center. And together we acknowledge the great work being done on the ground with farmers markets, CSAs, and other forms of direct sales. But we saw the impact we could make to move more good food into our mainstream food system by helping medium-sized growers scale up their capacity and connecting them to larger markets through value chain approaches. The National Good Food Network at the Wallace Center, along with many regional food systems leaders from around the country, then launched this network, a national coordinating organization where we work to assist regional leaders in the work they're doing on the ground, building their own networks and moving forward regional food systems and connecting with the national group so that we can share information freely and openly to accelerate our work. And we found great momentum in this national network and these regional networks. And we found that the Wallace Center's focus on market-based solutions, helping small and medium-sized growers, particularly those socially disadvantaged, to scale up their capacity and participate in this mainstream food system, has been a great place to house the NGFN. And we believe through this network and with many partners like those of you on the call today, we will increase small and medium-sized grower economic and environmental viability. And we'll add economic vitality to our rural and our urban areas. And we'll move more good food into those communities where children and family live, in particular those without that good food access. At the national level, the NGFN is a networking communications hub for knowledge and information, connecting people to people. People in the regions are connected to food systems experts all around the country. People to knowledge, models and information from the national level and at the regional level, much like this webinar today. And connecting people to sources of regional and national funding to continue the work going on in your region. An example is at ngfn.org. Many of you are adding your information and contact information for your organizations and yourselves to this website. We're finding this to be a great networking opportunity so that you can learn more about the work going on in your region and in other regions around the country. And the NGFN has mobilized other on-the-ground pilots, for example, with the Cisco Corporation, and the latest project report is on our site. And we're mobilizing this information to community. Again, assessing this information, synthesizing it, making it readable and understandable for those who want to get involved in regional food systems work. And the NGFN is, of course, collaborating with other networks like School Food Focus, Community Food Security Coalition, National Farm to School Network, and many others. And we're finding that together we're able to accomplish more, provide more impact, and accelerate the work on the ground in regional food systems. Now you'll see the goals of the National Good Food Network. And briefly, supply meets demand means that we are making a more focused effort on talking with institutional buyers about how we can connect our small and medium-sized growers with them in an effort to increase that local food supply, meeting the demand for it as is increasing every day. Information Hub, again, we talked about this. We would like to earn your respect and be one of the go-to places for regional food system stories, methods, and outcome. And policy change, we're scaling up our efforts on informing policy so that our policy makers can have tools and information they need to make decisions based on the values of the NGFN. Here's the map of the Good Food Network. And again, the Wallace Center and advisors guide the actions and development of the network, but here you'll see the regional hubs of activity connected to the network in areas all around the country. Here's a look at the Advisory Council. Joanne Bergenkamp, who will be on the webinar today, is one of our advisors and has been with us from the beginning. These folks are also listed on ngfn.org, contact information and more about the work they do. They constantly inform the network to help us build efficiencies and thinking on how to better serve our regions and serve you all. Here's a list of regional lead teams as well, and their contact information is on ngfn.org and their own respective websites. So that's a little bit about NGFN. Please contact us anytime at contact@ngfn.org with questions and suggestions. Now Jeff will introduce the presenters for today's webinar. We hope you enjoy today's presentations.
Thanks, Marty. That was great. The webinar is sort of in two pieces. First, we're going to get a sort of a high-level view of what School Food Focus does by Kathy Lawrence, and then Jim and Joanne are going to give us a really successful and interesting example of a program that Focus has done. So first, let me introduce Kathy. Kathy Lawrence has worked for 20 years in sustainable agriculture, local food systems development, and nonprofit management. She's the program director of School Food Focus that you'll learn about this afternoon, a national initiative which helps large school districts with 40,000 or more students procure more healthful, more sustainably produced, and regionally sourced food so that children may perform better in school and be healthier in life. Before serving as executive director of the National Campaign for Sustainable Agriculture, Kathy directed Just Food, the New York City-based nonprofit organization she founded in 1995. Prior to that, she coordinated outreach and education for the New York and Northeast Sustainable Agriculture Working Group and engaged in citizen advocacy at the United Nations. Kathy serves on the boards of Just Food and NESOG, the Northeast Sustainable Agriculture Working Group, sings in an a cappella jazz quartet, and is devoted to her perennial flower gardens. Okay, Kathy.
Great. Well, thank you very much, everybody. I'm glad to be here, and I'd like to welcome everyone who's on the call. I am just going to give a brief overview of School Food Focus, which, as Jeff mentioned, is a national network of school districts that are really at the relatively large scale, that are serving 40,000 kids up to, I think it's 1.2 million kids in New York City. And our goals, our collective goals really are to help those school districts procure food that is more healthful, more sustainably produced, and more regionally sourced, with a primary goal of really helping children perform better in school and be healthier in life. We're also well aware that making these changes in terms of large district procurement will also have a dramatic and positive impact on regional food systems, and so that is also definitely a part of our work. We got launched in late 2008. Officially, we've finished our second year of operations, and we're funded by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, gave us 3 years of funding to begin this initiative. We actually began earlier than that in 2007 with 2 focus groups that brought together representatives from 17 of the largest school districts in the country to really explore together with school food service directors and professionals, as well as some of their community partners, what it might look like to have a national network of big city schools that were really looking at these procurement issues. And so out of that collaborative process and really talking with those school food service professionals about what they needed and what they might like to see in a national effort, we then created Focus according to the priorities and the needs that they articulated at that time. So the objectives of Focus really are to develop and share methods to transform school meals, to really build a network of advocates who are seeking and making change, to communicate a practical vision for change with the emphasis on the practical, and really to leverage the procurement power of large school systems. So while our focus really is on the 40,000 and above, we also are well aware that in helping to pull good food through the supply chain into those large districts, we'll also be creating opportunities to get better food for districts of all sizes. So right now we've got about 30 school districts involved. They're primarily urban but not exclusively urban, and collectively they represent over 4 million kids in the K through 12 public school system. Oh, this is, we don't have a graphic of the actual districts that are totally participating in Focus right now, but this gives you a sense of the districts that were involved in our annual meeting in Chicago this March. So it gives the names of the districts and how many kids they're serving, and the F/R is the percentage of children in those systems who are eligible for free and reduced lunches. So that gives you a little snapshot of the districts that we're working with and the rough percentages that they represent in terms of the overall national public school population. So let me move on to, in addition to the school food service directors who are the primary school food focused stakeholders, we also encourage districts to work directly with community partners, and these there's a wide range of partners. Some of them are local advocacy groups, some are city governments, some are state departments of agriculture, state departments of education. We have national NGOs. For example, you'll hear later from Joanne Berkenkamp with IATP, the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy, which is definitely a national and international NGO. And these community partners bring expertise, they bring different perspectives, they give input into the process all along the way, and also can provide access to resources of different kinds than school food service professionals themselves might have access to, as well as real strength in pursuing education of different kinds of audiences, the kinds of folks that we're hoping can sort of make the transition from interested and sometimes adversarial parties to real informed champions of school food procurement change. And of course, community partners often have more leeway in terms of policy advocacy, and that can be a real help. So we have 3 primary program areas within School Food Focus: knowledge, policy, and the School Food Learning Lab, which you'll hear about in much more depth from the St. Paul perspective in just a few minutes from Joanne and Jim. In knowledge, what we realized from those early focus groups in 2007 was that there is a tremendous amount of passion, dedication, and really hard work going on in the large districts across the country, and that against tremendous odds and over-regulation and underfunding and public scrutiny, these school food service directors are really making changes. What was lacking, in their opinion, was a platform for sharing at scale, so at that larger scale, sharing amongst themselves what they were doing, what was being successful, what the challenges were, what the obstacles were, and also critically, what mistakes they'd made. One of our school food service directors says, you know, anybody can talk about the successes, and that's fine. It's great to know what other people have done, but what I really want to know is what are the mistakes you've made? And I want to be able to tell my fellow school food service directors some of the mistakes I've made so they don't have to make them again, and we can all accelerate this change without recreating the wheel and without hitting these sometimes inevitable roadblocks the same way. So we're really creating platforms and forums and avenues for that peer-to-peer communication to take place among those who are really making the changes at the ground level now. Obviously sharing best practices, but again, as I said, also really looking at what are the lessons learned, what are the challenges that have been confronted and met, or not. We help to create from that on-the-ground experience tools and materials to help other districts throughout the country make similar sorts of changes, of course adapted to their own situations, because it's definitely the case that this is not a one-size-fits-all. What can happen and what can work in one area won't necessarily work the same way in another area. Another component of our knowledge program is really facilitating sort of multi-sector, multi-stakeholder dialogues, whether that's on at our annual meeting once a year, or whether that's in Washington talking with USDA and others, or whether it's these kinds of webinars, for example, but trying to help make the connections and make the bridges among different kinds of interested organizations. So one of our knowledge products at this point is our Month in Focus, which is a monthly e-newsletter. We send it out to folks in their email boxes. It's also available on our website. And we're now building a nice body of features of the work that's really going on the ground in the districts and within their community partners. We also have a website that continues to get better and better. We feel like a very young organization still, and it's nice to see the website develop. So you can find information up there about us. We have a blog for carrying some of those features. We have a very nice service in media monitoring, which is really a distillation from all of the press and the coverage that's out there around school food in general to really focus on procurement issues specifically, primarily, again, at the large district level. And then we also have copies, of course, of our publications that are available. An increasing number will be posted on that website. Oh, there we go. Sorry. Another piece of knowledge that we're developing is our learnings from the lab, which is really looking at the very intensive and in-depth work that's going on with a very small number of school districts and figuring out how to translate what they're learning into tools and practical, concrete steps that other districts can take, with a focus, obviously, on stimulating changes in procurement across districts. And a couple of those, again, are up on the website ready to go, and they're from St. Paul, and you'll be hearing more about that very shortly. We're also starting a series called School Food 101, and that really was an outgrowth of a request from school food service professionals as well as community partners and others for information that really describes the operating realities of school food service in the nation's largest school districts for folks who are really interested and want to get more involved but aren't necessarily up to speed on the enormous intricacies of school food. And so we've planned this series of briefs. We've begun the first couple to really explain to parents, teachers, legislators, members of the press, a whole range of audiences, really what's going on. The first two pieces that we've completed are the cost of school lunch, USDA commodity foods, and school lunch. And so it's really a very clear, concise, short, objective description of how these programs work so that folks can sort of navigate that world a little more easily and become, again, those active and informed champions of change. Our second program area is in policy, and we set out to help develop and really amplify the big school district voice as it pertains to the 2009, now 2010, who knows, maybe it'll be the 2011 Child Nutrition Reauthorization, as well as relevant sections of Farm Bill implementation, and increasingly working on administrative change and meeting the new opportunities that are available within USDA to work with existing programs and existing funding streams to redirect them towards these more healthful, more regional, more sustainable practices in connection with school food. We have been very fortunate to have formed and maintained a collaboration that we call the One Tray team with the National Farm to School Network and the Community Food Security Coalition. And one of the first pieces that the three groups put together was called Nourishing the Nation One Tray at a Time. And that laid out our common priorities for child nutrition reauthorization, and you can find that on onetray.org. We then moved on to work together on this document called What Can USDA Do? Because we have really been experiencing unprecedented opportunity and openness within the USDA, and a lot of newly appointed folks in key positions who are really ready, willing, and able to work with advocacy and action groups and the folks working on the ground to make some of these changes. So what we did is craft this What Can USDA Do document outlining 10 priority areas that we would really love to see USDA take leadership in, and where we would also be ready, willing, and able to help them. Some of the highlights of that and some of the results of that have been USDA really stepping up to the plate to more clearly define geographic preference. There's currently a rule out that we're getting comments on to make sure that school districts in particular can make best possible use of the new, more open, less restricted definition of geographic preference to get that more local and more regional produce into their cafeterias. There's also been quite a bit of work on DoD Fresh, making it easier for school districts to work with DoD Fresh to get food, as well as, probably most of you know, the creation of a USDA farm-to-school team that's actually going out to make site visits to districts across the country to really learn about what's going on and what's needed so that USDA can better meet the challenges that are out there. We have also were able to have, I think we had 7 folks from USDA at our annual meeting in Chicago, and they were very much engaged. We had a USDA dialogue where they first presented and then really engaged in a pretty interesting and in-depth conversation with our stakeholders and expressed a great willingness to move forward with us, particularly in the arenas of commodity change and working incrementally to get better food through the USDA commodity system. So there's just a little picture of the What Can USDA Do document. You can find that on our website. And the third and final of our program areas is the learning labs, what we call the School Food Learning Lab. And this is really where the rubber hits the road, and what we do is bring school districts together with their community partners, together with a research team and a learning lab manager to really look together at the food supply and look at what schools are currently purchasing, what kinds of changes they want to make, and really analyze what steps will have the highest likelihood of success in the priority areas that they have chosen based on this sort of assessment, analysis, and priority setting. I'm just going to talk about this very briefly because Jim and Joanne are going to go into great depth based on their own experiences. So we go through this process and we document the process results, the lessons learned. We create the learnings from the lab. Our first district was St. Paul, and we're wrapping up and sort of packaging those results. Denver is about 2/3 of the way through its process. It's the second learning lab, and Chicago will be our third district, and we'll begin working with them in mid-July. There are just a couple things I want to say about the Learning Lab that has sort of been created by our research and technical assistance team. And one is just sort of the foundations of the Learning Labs and some of the operating principles, which are really based on partnerships, true collaboration among the schools and the school food service leaders, the community partners, and the School Food Learning Lab team. With the school food service professionals in the driver's seat. This is not about us waltzing in and saying this is what you ought to do. This is us waltzing in and saying what do you want to do and how can we help and what kinds of dialogues and interviews and data collection and practical change can we help you make based on what you most want to do. It's truly a co-learning and co-creation of knowledge that comes out of this, and one of the researchers, David Connor, always adds this bullet point about no transformation without ambiguity and risk, which he says is absolutely not the usual or comfortable practice for a university researcher, but has proven to be very effective. These are really learning journeys where a lot of the learning comes from the acknowledged fact that we don't know, that we have a lot of questions, and it's okay to ask those questions and figure out things as we go. It's a very participatory action research approach, and based really on value-based value chains and really learning about supply chains. So with that, I'm going to leave you with just basic contact information for School Food Focus. Those are our staff, that's our website, and I'm going to introduce you to our next speakers. Oh wait, should I introduce? Or should I?
Yeah, let's do that just as we switch over control. Just wanted to make sure the briefs that you talked about, those are available on your website?
Yep.
Okay, great.
The School Food 101 briefs are on the website.
Okay,
under
good.
our publications page.
Okay, so why don't we ask people if there are questions about focus in general. Let's let Jim and Joanne present, and then we'll have a nice solid block of Q&A section after their presentation. So Kathy, why don't you introduce Jim and Joanne?
Okay, I would love to. We are really fortunate today to have Jim Grosskopf, who is the perching analyst for St. Paul Public Schools in Minnesota in the Nutrition Services Department. Jim earned his BS in Hotel and Restaurant Management from the University of Wisconsin-Stout, and he's past president of the Minnesota School Nutrition Association, the Minnesota SNA, and obviously a member of School Food Focus's first Learning Lab team. He's also on the Minnesota School Nutrition Association Farm to School Task Force and a voting member of the Minnesota School Food Buying Group. And he has been an absolutely essential player in this first Learning Lab, bringing an incredible depth and specificity of knowledge that has really led to a lot of the results. He will be co-presenting with Joanne Berkenkamp, who is the Program Director for Local Foods at the Institute for Agriculture and Trade Policy, IATP, in Minneapolis. And IATP partners very closely with the Minnesota School Nutrition Association to help build up farm-to-school activities across the state. And IATP also partners with the St. Paul Public Schools in the National School Food Focus Network, which is why they're here today. They're also working with the Minnesota Department of Health on a statewide farm-to-school effort through statewide health improvement program called SHIP. And Joanne is a national figure in food and agriculture and food systems and evaluation programs of all sorts. So you're in for a treat, and I'll pass it over to you all.
Thank you, Kathy. Okay, as we get started, I would like to give folks a little overview of St. Paul Public Schools. For those of you who don't know much about St. Paul, we're a community, the sister city to Minneapolis, about 300,000 people. Our district has 38,000 students enrolled, and a little over 70% of our students are eligible for free reduced price meals. We serve school lunch and school breakfast at all 68 locations, and our participation rate is about 37% for breakfast and 78% for lunch. We have 50 elementary schools, 6 junior and middle high schools, 7 high schools, and 8 other school programs, and like many districts across the country, we are closing 8 schools for the upcoming school year. Our operation style is a centralized/decentralized operation. We have a central commissary with a cook-chill facility. We prepare fresh-made baked goods, entrees, sauces, desserts, and we ship everything out from our central kitchen once a day to all locations for what's on the menu the next day. We participate to the full extent possible in the USDA commodity program. We bring in brown box commodities, the traditional food items, into our central commissary, the ground beef, the diced chicken, the various types of cheeses, and we use those in food production in our central facility. We bake all our own French bread. We bake all our own breakfast breads, again using USDA commodity flour and then other ingredients. We serve the conventional way in our schools. If you go to any of our schools for lunch, you would think that everything is prepared on site. Our schools have full kitchens. We use permanent ware trays. We use real stainless steel silverware and have ware washing where all possible. The programs that we participate in are the Provision 2 breakfast program, where all students at most of our schools can eat breakfast at no cost. This past year, we have rolled out a breakfast-to-go program, or breakfast in the classroom, to over 30% of our schools, or over 50% of our schools, about 30 schools at this point, and our goal is to roll it out to almost all schools for the next school year. And this has greatly improved our breakfast participation and really changed the classroom environment in the morning as kids are more attentive. They're eating as a family, less visits to the nurse's office, all those types of positive things. We also participate in the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Grant Program. This past year we had 21 schools participating, where these students had a fresh fruit or vegetable snack in the classroom on a daily basis. And we did some more exotic things, fresh pineapple, fresh mango slices, different types of apples, vegetables, sweet potato sticks, kohlrabi sticks, sugar snap peas, those types of things. We also offer an unlimited choice bar in all of our schools, and this is a bar that has fresh fruits and vegetables, and now it has a protein item such as cottage cheese, shredded cheese, a black bean salad, a bean and pasta salad, and hard-cooked eggs. We also are a sponsor for the Summer School Food Service Program, which is starting next week, and we also participate in School Food Focus. Our mission statement is we create and serve foods that students get excited about. Our healthy hits are served with respect by a caring staff effectively managing resources. We worked with a marketing consultant a few years ago, had focus groups from the community, students, parents, community stakeholders, and folks from the district, and we really came up with a strong new marketing program and a new mission statement. And one of our trademarks is healthy hits and fresh food, because we found out from the students, especially, that their perception was that our food was not fresh. So we obviously had to move forward and really market that. Okay, with our School Food Focus Learning Lab, when we were selected to be the first learning lab, we had a list of our top 10 food items that we would like to see about making improvement on and changing. And some of these have been on our list for many, many years. And for many reasons, we found it really challenging to move forward. But with School Food Focus, we looked at our top 10 list and we narrowed it down to really what we want to accomplish in our 18-month experience with it being a learning lab. And the first item was the more local, sustainable fresh fruits and vegetables. We wanted to lower the grams of sugar in our flavored milk. We wanted to find a way to get hamburger buns and hot dog buns that met minimum 51% white or 51% whole grain, delivered directly to our schools by a bakery supplier. And then also we wanted to look at what we could do with using and cooking fresh chicken, raw chicken in school cafeterias. And obviously, to make any endeavor successful, we need partners, and we partnered, obviously, with School Food Focus. Created Incorporated is a local produce manufacturer, processor that we worked with, and then also with IATP, and I think Joanne is ready to step in with IATP.
Great. It's good to be with everyone today. So, Jeff, I don't know if you can back us up 2 slides back to the Farm to School logo. There we go. Thank you. So I want to talk with you a little bit about the local produce part of the School Food Learning Lab experience in St. Paul, and Jim will talk with you about some of the other elements. So one of the real priorities for St. Paul has been doing more with locally grown. And the district has done some things over the years, although mostly on a fairly small scale. But this effort in St. Paul really came along at a time that there was growing momentum statewide around farm to school. And we just wanted to show you the logo that was developed here in a partnership between IATP and the Minnesota School Nutrition Association. This farm to school, local farms, fresh food logo that's starting to appear all over the state as people pick up farm to school efforts. So if we can back up one, Jeff. There we go. So as we started looking at this issue of local produce through the lab, there are a few parameters that we were really working with. One is that even though, as Jim mentioned, St. Paul can do a lot with actual scratch cooking, things that you and I would think of as cooking, they have the facilities to do. They do nonetheless need to get produce pre-cut, so carrots chopped into carrot coins and that sort of thing. Secondly, their quantity needs are fairly significant given the size of the school district. And when they prepare food, it goes out to their entire student population across the district at once. So they need enough to be able to feed the whole school on a given day. So for instance, what that means is to serve corn on the cob, they would need 15,000 ears on one day. Or to serve potatoes, they would need 3,000 or 4,000 pounds at a time. And then lastly, their menus, for instance, for the fall are prepared in the spring. So they need to be able to plan significantly in advance and have those types of commitments in place to get that product. So as we were getting started, we did a few things. The first was to sit down, myself and Jim and his colleagues at the schools, and we really tried to quantify what the possible produce items were and what their volumes might be. And we literally sat down with all of their monthly menus, the calendars, and thought about, okay, when can we replace a non-local item with a local item? When can we switch from something that might have come in a more processed form into something that would be local and more unprocessed? And we charted all that out. And then we had a meeting with the 2 produce processing companies that St. Paul has originally worked with, and with a number of farmers and the Minnesota Fruit and Vegetable Growers Association. And we had everybody in the same room together. And I think it was the first time, for instance, that the 2 processors had been in the same room. And it was certainly the first time that we had had farmers at the table with the processors to really talk about what a successful relationship would look like for everybody. And it was important to have the farmers in the room to get their perspective out in a safe environment about what a closer relationship would look like both with the processor and with the school system. The other thing that was interesting about having the 2 processors in the room together is that they're competitors. Their offices are maybe 2 miles apart, but they are competitors with one another. St. Paul puts out a bid for their produce, and then both of those processors submit bids. So we wanted them to know that we were serious about this. We wanted them to know that they did have competition in the bidding process, and we wanted to have an opportunity to meet with them and really talk about what we were looking for in a very open, kind of transparent forum. So the next step then was to take those numbers and those intentions and put them into an RFP specifically for local produce. And St. Paul has always had a specific bid for produce generally, but this is the first time that we've done a contract or an RFP specific for local. And again, the idea was to say we're serious about the local piece very specifically, and we'll choose based on the capacity of the processors to get what we're looking for. We started off with a definition of local that was 200 miles. And as I'll tell you about, we were actually able to tighten that radius significantly. We put in a preference for Food Alliance approved to bring in that sustainability component. And then we included some things like the right for the St. Paul schools and IATP to go back and audit the payments to the farmers, to speak with the farmers, to really try to get more transparency in how the farmers were being affected by all this. So here's some of the results, just very quickly. That RFP process taught us a lot, gave a lot more clarity about the processor's strengths and limitations. We found one of the processors really had what we needed. We found that another processor who had made a lot of claims about what they could offer, in fact, didn't have it. And when we really pressed them to specify which farmers they were working with, what their processing capacity was, we found that they didn't, in fact, have what we needed. So there was a lot of clarity created through that RFP process. We identified the farmers. Nearly all of the farmers that are working with the processor that was selected are within a 65-mile radius, which was great, 65 miles from St. Paul. There was much more transparency about the farmer compensation, and we were able then to agree on a set of products and prices for the fall of 2009. So that was last year. So here's a story about what happened then in the fall of 2009. The products listed on the left were all offered in the first 6 weeks of the school year. It totaled 110,000 pounds of local produce, equivalent to $76,000, and it was 56% of the total fresh produce that the school district purchased during that 6 weeks period. So it was a lot of product. And that effort with farm to school and local produce continued through the remainder of the school year, and has included things like locally produced bison, wild rice, fresh cranberries, organic flax, and a whole variety of other things that have now been incorporated into the menus. So looking forward into 2010, in the first 18 days of the upcoming school year, St. Paul is going to have 17 different produce items on the menu, which includes a number of days where you've got several local items being featured on the menu during the beginning of the school year. Additional items on the choice bars or the salad bars, some new items like fresh green beans, sweet potatoes, white potatoes, and some other things, and then the incorporation of local produce and other items into the menus through the continuation of the year. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Jim to tell you a little bit more about the marketing of that effort.
Thank you, Joanne. Part of our marketing, if we can go back to slide, Jeff, please. Part of our marketing program is we have bulletin boards in every school cafeteria located where the kids come into the cafeteria, so hopefully while they're standing in line they can pick up some tidbits of what we're doing. We put together a map of our farm fresh foods, which you can see on the left, showing where product came from that we offered last fall and how close it really was to St. Paul. When we do a new menu item, we do a marketing piece. This one in the center was for roasted harvest vegetables. That was on the serving line as a marketing piece for students to see as they go by. And then you can see on the right there's one that says spotlight on corn. Again, that just shows a picture of a ear of corn, because we find, and probably many of you know also, kids these days don't know, their experience with corn may be corn out of a can, not knowing how it is actually grown and in its natural state. And we change out our marketing pieces depending upon what product we are offering at what point in time to keep it fresh and exciting for the kids. The next piece of our local Farm to School program is we implemented last fall a classroom reading project where we have our food service staff choose one of 3 books, which you can see here, The Tiny Seed, Gus and Buttons, and I'm sorry I can't see the other one here, and go to the classroom, first, second, third graders, and read a story. It takes 10-15 minutes, reads a story about characters that are related to fruits and vegetables. And I had the opportunity to do it at an elementary school for second graders this past spring, and just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And kids had tons of questions and great interest. This book I read was Gus and Buttons' story about some mushroom folks. Okay, and here's a photo of the classroom, one of our cafeteria staff in a classroom reading setting. And then as we move on to our school food focus 4 items, we talked about the fresh produce. The next thing we wanted to work on was lowering the grams of sugar in flavored milk. Our dairy supplier last year, the milk had 27 grams of sugar for a half-pint carton for the chocolate skim and the strawberry skim. And we are really trying to get the grams of sugar down to 22 grams, which is the new IOM Institute of Medicine recommendation. And we were having some challenges with our dairy suppliers, folks not really wanting to step up to the plate. And when we had to go out to bid last year for dairy products, and part of our bid packet was ahead of time, we sent a bunch of information out there, research information about formulations for lower grams of sugar in milk, for success stories, for, some other information was happening across the country. And then when we sent the bid packet out, we requested on the bid form that the prospective bidders pick a category of the grams of sugar in flavored milk that they'd be willing to produce. And when the bids came back, our current milk supplier was the most cost-effective, and they had agreed to lower the grams of sugar in their flavored milk to the 22 grams. So starting for fall of 2009, all of our flavored milk had 22 grams of sugar. And one positive spin-off is that this dairy supplier supplies milk to many school districts in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, and they all are now receiving flavored milk with 22 grams of sugar. And we also have made the decision here in St. Paul, starting for the upcoming school year, we will no longer be offering strawberry flavored milk, and we will no longer be offering chocolate milk for breakfast, as again to really try to look at the whole milk offerings and what's the best for our students. The next challenge that we had was working with our bakery supplier to provide hamburger buns and hot dog buns that were minimum 51% whole wheat. So this product would count as a whole grain serving. Sara Lee has been our bakery supplier for years, and we require our bakery supplier to deliver fresh baked buns bulk packed to all of our 60 locations. And we were really facing some challenges with Sara Lee being willing to move forward on looking at some other products. And through the efforts of School Food Focus, we were able to have representatives from Sara Lee around the country from the R&D department come to St. Paul a little over a year and a half ago and talk about how can we make this effort move forward and really pushing the potential for Sara Lee across the country with having a bread hamburger bun, hot dog bun product that meets the minimum 51% white or 51 whole wheat requirement. And we were looking for the use of the white whole wheat flour such as the ConAgra Ultra Grain flour because it's much more palatable for our students, and it's a product that we've used currently in our in-house baking, and our students are familiar with the quality of those products. So Sara Lee finally came to the table with a product they developed with 53% white whole wheat flour. We tested and evaluated it with students and found it to be acceptable. And this is a hamburger bun and hot dog bun we'll be offering this fall. And again, as I talk to colleagues around Minnesota and other parts of the Midwest, I understand Sara Lee is now out marketing the same product to districts around the state. So again, another positive spin-off and positive result, much broader than just St. Paul is regarding the changing of the product. The next item we were looking at was the chicken. And Golden Plum Chicken is a privately held chicken processing, fully integrated processing company here in Minnesota. It's about 100 miles from St. Paul. And we offer chicken, baked chicken, not a lot, but on a fairly regular basis, and it's a really popular menu with our students. One of the challenges of the baked chicken that we were using previously was an 8-cut rotisserie style pre-cooked chicken where the serving sizes, the pieces, were obviously you have breast pieces, you have thigh pieces, you have legs and wings. And challenge for either the portion was too small for a student, not big enough, and cooking challenges and all sorts of things. So we thought, what could we do to really go back and look at, could we do something with fresh chicken in our schools? We met with Golden Plum. We sampled their chicken drumsticks, came up with a product. They have a product that's very nice. It works well for us. We piloted it in an elementary school, and the kids just loved the product. Joanne and I had the opportunity to tour the Golden Plum Chicken Processing Factory and one of the farms where the chickens are raised a month and a half ago as part of our whole evaluation process of moving forward with Golden Plump. And, many concerns about working with raw chicken and food safety and the related. And so therefore we really looked at the product, how it was packed, microbiological testing on the product we received. In fact, tomorrow our staff is filming a YouTube-type video to show our staff how to safely prepare and serve and handle chicken when they're baking chicken in the schools this fall. So we are really excited about going back to, getting real food, locally produced, and serving, good quality baked chicken at St. Paul schools. And I guess as we look at this, these are all ideas we've had, for many years, and has really been with the partnership with School Food Focus and IATP that we're able to, move forward. And, I'm very much involved in day-to-day operations of what we do here. And as we all know, many times we get bogged down in day-to-day operations. And so just and you have all these great ideas and these great thoughts, but it's a matter of having the resources to get them done. So with the assistance of the Learning Lab folks from School Food Focus and Joanne, it really kept us on track and kept us, moving forward to accomplish our goals. And there's been some struggles, but it's been, the successes have definitely outweighed the struggles, and we're just, looking forward to continue to share what we've done in St. Paul schools with, other folks around the state and around the country. And in closing here, that, really what we've been able to do with School Food Focus is, and our other efforts that we've leveraged our strengths to transform, school meals in St. Paul, and we really pride ourselves on our centrally prepared, scratch cooking. We've partnered with IATP, Minnesota School Nutrition Association, School Food Focus, the Community Design Center in St. Paul, and many other organizations to, move forward here. We market extensively what we do, and also we celebrate our flops. And we realize that if you look at any company, you may test 200 new prototypes before you find the one that works. And that's sort of how we view looking at new food items here, new menu items, that type of thing. And and our department really goals are to impact lifelong eating habits of our students and impact choices available outside the cafeteria. And one thing I need to share with you folks real quick about this, we made the decision this past school year for the 2010 school year we will not be offering any a la carte items in any of our cafeterias here in St. Paul. We scaled down our a la carte offerings many years ago, and we did some more analysis, and we decided the time has come not to offer any a la carte items in St. Paul. So all we will be offering for our students is the reimbursable meal, and hopefully great food and great choices on the reimbursable meal line. And then we want students to remember us for creating a warm and welcoming environment, and also, of course, having, and offering great food. So that's a little bit about St. Paul. Thanks for the opportunity to share.
Okay, so there are some great questions out there right now that people have submitted, and I will begin to ask our panelists. But I really wanted to encourage you all to ask your questions of these great practitioners. This is your chance. So let me start out with a question from Marlene. She asks about critical lessons that have been learned thus far. Maybe Kathy, you want to start with this?
Yes, Jeff, thank you. And then I'd welcome Jim and Joanne to chime in with their own experience.
Yeah, definitely.
What we've learned so far from St. Paul and Denver in terms of the Learning Lab process, I would say the number one lesson learned sounds so simple that it hardly sounds like a lesson at all. But I think we have learned again and again and again that there is absolutely no substitute for face-to-face discussion, getting the right people and a critical mass of people and the right kinds of folks represented around the table to really talk through some of these issues, and that the groundwork that goes into identifying the critical players, whether they are aggregators or processors or producers or distributors, the right people within the school food system at the right time, but allowing the time for those discussions is a critical piece of the discovery process. And sometimes it has taken multiple conversations, in depth over a period of weeks to figure out that we're not even talking apples and apples, we're talking apples and oranges, and that's a huge aha moment. And once you figure that out, you can start talking apples and apples and really make progress. That's been a major, major lesson, is doing the homework, setting up these interviews, providing the opportunity for those face-to-face discussions, doing then the follow-up, going back and saying, okay, these are the things we don't know, we need to figure them out, getting some of that information, coming back to the table to make those practical steps. I think the other piece has been that it has been absolutely essential, as you've heard from Jim's presentation, to have the school food service folks who are in the trenches day in and day out at the table making those critical decisions, with the additional support and legwork and facilitation and relationship building from that research and technical assistance team that can really then catalyze change that occurs during the learning lab itself and then well beyond. I think another major lesson has really been that very small incremental changes can build momentum and inspire large ones, and that in this working environment, the margins are so tight, the budgets are so tight, the scrutiny is so great that you have to build from success. And to get success sometimes means working in small incremental ways that then can build quite quickly if you start from that success to begin with. I also mentioned the one size doesn't fit all, and I think that's something that we're learning across the learning labs, and we'll find out even more about when we bring Chicago in. So I would leave you with some of those lessons and encourage Jim and Joanne to chime in as well.
This is Joanne. The thing I would say is, as the nonprofit partner with St. Paul, is it's really important to invest in your own learning about how school food works. I think, as many of you probably know, it's really complicated. It's harder to affect change in that system than I think most people who aren't school food service professionals would have expected. So I think that piece about really investing and understanding the details is important. And I think also really coming at it as a partner, like shoulder to shoulder, like figuring it out together is really critical. And the more I spend time with school food service staff, the more I see how much flack they get. And there's a lot of bad press and often some negative energy. And I feel badly that that so frequently happens. And when IATP got into this work, we said, okay, number one, we're really going to try to understand this field, and secondly, we're going to try to partner and be helpful and use that kind of approach as a way to affect positive change. And St. Paul's been great because they've been so responsive to that, and their leadership is really creative and open to new ideas, to taking risks, and to moving forward and trying to be creative about things.
That's great. Another question for you, Kathy, from Chelsea. Is Focus looking to or willing to partner with any more schools? And if so, how does a school or school system get connected?
That's a great question, and I want to make it clear that we don't work with individual schools. We work with entire school districts, and we really are maintaining for the time being that 40,000 and above. So it's got to be school districts that are serving 40,000 and above. We are in a process always of looking to engage school districts where there is real leadership, passion, and energy at the school food service level to go in the directions that we're wanting to go. And we're also developing a more a clear statement of what it means to be a focused stakeholder and the values and the principles that we all share so that we can make sure that the school districts we're working with really are committed. So all of that said, yes, we are always looking to work with more school districts, and we're also very much focused on deepening and making more meaningful the interactions we have with the school districts who are already involved. So I'd say it's both and.
Great. Jim, for you, Kim asks, what are the additional costs in making the changes to the food items that you made? And if there are increased costs, how are the differences being covered?
Okay, it's a great question because cost obviously plays into everything. What we have found in St. Paul, the cost piece is really a balancing act. And yes, some items are more expensive to offer than others. For example, a piece of fresh corn on the cob may be 20 cents a serving versus canned corn at 15 cents a serving. So you're looking at incremental cost of a nickel, for that menu day. We found with the chicken that we're going to be pursuing for fall, the portion of the frozen cooked chicken was about 65 cents a serving, and the chicken drumsticks are going to be about 28 cents a serving. So it's a huge reduction in cost. And part of it, a big part of it, is just the menu planning, balancing higher cost items with lower cost items, and looking at your overall food cost, percent of revenue. We tend to run a 34%, food costs 33 to 34% of revenue, and that really works well for us to keep everything, organized, financially. And, so many times I think people look at costs of individual items and really need to look at the incremental cost. If you're replacing a frozen potato with a fresh potato, it's the incremental cost of X number of cents per serving. Same thing with, fresh produce versus, other produce. Last year in Minnesota, there was an overabundance of small-size apples that were really cost-effective for us, and we featured lots and lots of, locally grown apples. We have found at times this past year, our produce suppliers would contact us with the growers when they would have extra product that they couldn't find a home for, and we're willing to sell it to our processor at a lower cost. And then they in turn would offer to St. Paul schools at a lower cost versus the farmers or growers having to plow the crop under because there wasn't a market for it. So this was another, positive. And a good example of that was, butternut squash. That squash that had blemishes on them, the growers could not sell to the retail market. But they're great for us because we could, our processor peeled them, cubed them, packaged them, and shipped them to us, and we use it for roasted squash. So as I said, as I wrap up here, I think it's really a balancing act, looking at menus and looking at options and monitoring your food cost budget.
Mm-hmm. Great, that's exciting stuff, definitely. Some of it is even cheaper, so that's great. Will asks about the vision, the future vision for school food focus over, say, the next 5 years or so, and what are the exciting potentials and what seem to be the largest barriers that you might encounter?
Oh, such a good question. I would say that well, first I'd mention that we have just embarked on a strategic planning process, which will help us more clearly define where we're going the next 3 to 5 years and what the best and biggest opportunities are. I think that we are at a point where we're just emerging out of our sort of startup phase where we've just been working, and we're now at the point of really being able to crank out a lot more material that has come from the practical experience of a variety of school districts and really get that out more broadly. So I think that there's a lot of potential in the backlog, if you will, of information and how-to and methodology that could get out there. So we're really looking forward to doing more of that over the next year and continuing it over the next 3 to 5 years. There's also tremendous potential in I think, sharing more in-depth the peer-to-peer communication on what's going on in the school districts. And so we're looking at a series of webinars that really are not so much presentational and overview and but are more working dialogues among the school food service professionals who are really making these changes so that they can talk among themselves without the cost of travel about how they did specific things, whether it's the working with raw chicken in St. Paul, for example, and how do you really make that happen, or any other very specific change. So there's great potential there. One of the pieces we really didn't talk about in the overview is the leveraging of procurement power among these big districts. And we have begun that process in chicken and to a certain extent in whole grains. And what we're looking at is the fact that even working with large districts, there's often not enough clout in an individual school district to shift some of the most highly concentrated and consolidated food sectors in the country, like chicken. And so what we've done is begin polling our school food service directors about just what they're buying to demonstrate what the buying power is. For example, they're collectively buying over 30 million pounds of chicken a year. And then looking at what their preferences would be for higher quality chicken products. And there was an enormously exciting conversation that sort of began with among the school food service folks about, well, at least with all this market power we could get a better chicken nugget. And then that conversation went all the way across the spectrum to more and more healthful, regional, sustainable, and finally got to a conversation about a whole rotisserie chicken that's humanely raised without all the additives and fillers and antibiotics and all that stuff, and workers who had living wages. So the challenge there is to say, okay, there's a desire on the part of the school food service folks to really serve this better food. There's huge market power among these districts that could come up with shared criteria or specifications. And now how do we harness that and really make the changes? And always factor in, of course, the availability of the foods and the cost of the foods. But there's a lot to be done, I think, in that leveraging of procurement power in some of the tougher food industry segments. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Okay, there are several really great questions in the queue, and so we're going to hope that our presenters will have a little bit of time to maybe give a written answer that we can post for the archive. But this seems like a really good segue into the exciting nascent partnership between the National Good Food Network and School Food Focus. So if I can ask Marty and then Kathy to speak a little bit, some of the specifics on that, that'd be great.
Hi everyone, this is Marty Garenser again with the National Good Food Network. Just wanted to speak for a minute on the collaboration discussions that we're having with School Food Focus. You know, we've been in discussions and looking at short-term ways that we can do things together, and this webinar is an example of one great collaboration. We hope you'll agree. And there are also national discussions, regional discussions, and perhaps the webinar series that Kathy spoke to, where we can provide technical assistance and help School Food Focus achieve some of their missions. But on the ground and out in the regions, you know, if you kind of think about the National Good Food Network, we're in the business of supply chains and we know product. You know, it's sort of the supply side of it, helping growers scale up and helping organizations participate in the mainstream food system. And so to be thinkers at the table with School Food Focus, as they are, you know, in the business of regional and sustainable procurement, we're thinking that and we're going to test some ways on the ground that we can be partners together in the thinking of this and how best to serve this work so that better and healthy food moves on into the schools. But we've got to do some thinking about it first, and we've got to look at chicken, and we've got to look at fruits and veggies, and we've got to sort of meet these school food folks where they're at first and build, sometimes in smaller steps, that are big steps. And then we can move on into connecting the growers and moving more food into these larger schools as well as some of the smaller school districts. So that's kind of where we're at and what we're thinking about. And so now Kathy was going to share some perspectives, some school food focus.
Thanks, Marty. Just briefly, to echo first everything that Marty just said, I think we're embarking on a learning journey about how the two networks might best collaborate. And I think to give a little more detail on the webinar series, we've been thinking about topics that might be of real interest to either the Good Food Network folks and the School Food Focus folks, and also the National Farm to School Network, because I think there's a lot of cross-fertilization that can be done, and I think real interest again in getting to nitty-gritty how-to discussions that really move everyone's work forward, because it's the folks who are in the trenches sharing their stories about how to make these things really move and really work, and then bringing to those discussions a multiplicity of perspectives and expertises that add the producer side, the supply chain expertise, the culinary pieces that someone talked about. There are all kinds of connections to be made. We're also beginning conversations about looking at possible collaboration between the Good Food Network and School Food Focus in terms of our learning lab work. And so we may be looking at ways to open up the Chicago Learning Lab process to some participation and learning and feedback from the National Good Food Network. So that's in very early stages, but stay tuned.
Well, thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Marty. The Focus National Good Food Network partnership is just picking up speed, and we'd love to hear your ideas and input on how to make the most of our partnership. So if you want, you can type in any ideas you in the audience there have right now in the question box, or in the post-webinar survey, there is a question about the partnership, and at any time, you should feel free to email contact@ngfn.org. So we're definitely all ears. Right now, I want to thank our presenters, Kathy Lawrence, Jim Groskopf, and Joanne Birkenkamp, for taking the time to present their great work on this NGFN webinar. The National Good Food Network webinars are the third Thursday of each month at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. That's noon 30 Pacific. And all of our webinars are archived and are accessible on the web at ngfn.org/webinars. Our next webinar is the third Thursday of July 15, where you learn how to build support from local governments to forward your efforts in getting more good food into the food system. Mark Winnie, known nationally for his work with local governments and good food initiatives, will present all about working with local governments. With an examples-based presentation, drawing on his wide-ranging experiences, Mark will explain what outcomes are reasonable to expect, how to talk to your local politicos in a way that they can get behind, some warnings of what to steer clear of, and more. We think this webinar will be really stellar, particularly since right now local governments are starting to get on the good food bandwagon. And in August, look forward to learning about the interesting work at the Sustainable Food Lab. And you can register for either one of these webinars at ngfn.org/webinars. We also, as I mentioned, have a growing archive of all of the webinars that we've done, and we've been doing it for over a year now, so there's really a lot of great stuff. There's recordings, slides, written question and answers, and other resources. And this particular webinar recording should be up within a few business days. The NGFN wants to keep you updated on the latest in the rapidly moving food safety domain. Every second Tuesday of the month, we have a food safety conference call led by our food safety coordinator, Steve Warschauer, and anyone is welcome to join in. It's at 3:30 p.m., 3:30 p.m. Eastern, 12:30 Pacific, and the call-in number is posted a few days before, and the food safety section of ngfn.org, just /food safety. You also find at that same web address lots of useful documents, including a food safety FAQ to get you up to speed on all the technical terminology you're likely to hear. There are monthly written updates, and we're excited about our series of interviews with some of the people closest to the issue, our Food Safety Talks series. We have the Q&A posted from 4 different people who have been watching the food safety legislation very closely from their different perspectives. It's very interesting read, and those 2 are at ngfn.org/foodsafety. You can also find NGFN on YouTube, Twitter, and of course our website. And I'd really like to encourage you to add your name, interests, your bio, and other information to our growing database of people, organization, and funders, increasing your ability to connect to people within your regions and across regions nationally. We're really starting to push this resource as a place to find people and doing similar or complementary work. This is all part of the NGFN acting as a connector. Look for the database link in the resources section of our website. And if you haven't already, sign up for our email updates. There's a link on the ngfn.org homepage. Please contact us at any time, contact@ngfn.org. And the NGFN would like to thank you for your time today. Once again, let me encourage you to fill out the survey that will open in your web browser in just a moment. And again, thank you for your questions. All right, see you next month.